Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healer specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory and welcome to episode 284 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Today we're thrilled to have an insightful guest, Cath Knibbs, a psychotherapist and behavioural technologist who studies technology's impact on cognitive and emotional development. Today, she shares her insights into how technology can negatively impact clients, especially around the area of data harvesting by devices.
Thank you, Rory. Looking forward to hearing Cath speak. And of course, before we do go into practice matters, we're going to be delving into student services, where today we're going to be covering why we learn counselling theory. There are reasons, people, I tell you. And then we'll be moving into ethical, sustainable practice, where we'll be looking at managing client breaks over the holiday season. If you're listening in real time, it is of the moment, I tell you. So that is what you can expect from episode 284 today. So Rory, tell me, why is it that we need to learn this counselling theory?
Well, it's an interesting question, isn't it? It is a question that comes up in assignment boards papers. You might be asked this question in your criteria. Why do we need to learn counselling theory? And I think it's really interesting. I would say, first of all, that we come from a place of first do no harm. So all counselling theory is researched. It's researched. And there's a big base of research. It doesn't matter which counselling theory you're studying, be it person-centred or transactional analysis or cognitive behavioural therapy, or it might be a mix. You might be doing an integrative course. All the theory is researched, and it's researched at a really deep level. So the people who've researched it realize that you can't do any harm with counselling theory. So if someone were to make their own theory up, you can imagine there could be lots and lots of pitfalls and tripwires that people might come across making it up. By using counselling theory, you know that you're using a modality, or sometimes it's called a helping mechanism, which is tried and tested and has the least negative impact on clients, Ken.
Yeah, and I guess it's an agreed upon framework. It is a peer-reviewed framework rather than a gut feel or a thinking that something should be done in a certain way, where we're kind of maybe making it up based on our experience and our past. We go to a theory that has been tried, tested, and of course peer-reviewed before it is published. And I guess when we're speaking about the importance of theory in counselling, we can look at the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is a psychological study that kind of shows that that it is a bias where people with a limited knowledge or competence within a certain area will overestimate their abilities. They will act on what they think is the right thing to do. And if we go to that non-maleficence that you mentioned, Rory, as we kind of came into this, we can't be using things that we think up or think are a great idea in service of our clients, because we can get it wrong. And just to give an example of that, let's say, for instance, a client comes in and they're going through something that maybe parallels something that you once went through in your life at an earlier stage. Having this, the way I dealt with it is this, so I'm going to help this client by urging them to go down the route that I went down. Well, that is not in service of the client. And if we go to look at the theories, there is no theory that suggests that we tell a client how we overcame something within our own life. So I think it is so important that we're working from a sound theory base when we're working with clients, Rory. And of course, I like the definition of theory. So it's Felton and Dradam, 1993. They define theory as conceptualization of the explanation, I love this wording, by the way, of the explanation for the ways in which people function and malfunction, and in which counselling helps or cannot help. So that's a very dry and kind of academic way of putting it, but it's saying the same kind of thing. We can't be making it up as we go along. We want to be pinning it to a theory that we know has some form of evidence base that has been peer reviewed, so we know we're on solid ground when leading and working with our clients, Rory.
Yes, absolutely. And, that links into, the wider format of counselling. If you're using a theory that is tried and tested, you're trained in, or you're training in, and a complaint is raised, one of the things that might be asked is, well, what modality of therapy are you using? I can remember many years ago when I was supervising training groups, and we had a case discussion circle, and someone said that the client wasn't progressing very much and they were a bit worried. And I said, well, how are you applying the theory? And she said, well, I'm using Jungerian theory. And I said, well, we're on a person-centered course. I said, and what's Jungerian theory? And she said, well, it's Carl Gustav Jung. I said, well, it's Jungian to start off with. And where are you learning this? And I've read it in a book. And I think that tells a tale in itself, Ken. You can't just, read a book and think, well, I'll just apply this theory. This sounds better than the one I'm using, because you just don't have the support mechanism. You don't have the practice base you're practicing within, your college or your training session. And, to be a Jungian psychoanalyst, it takes about 7 years. It's a really intense set of training. It can't be learned from a book. So with words spoken, we went back to the original plan of being a person-centered therapist, and lo and behold, client progressed. I also think that understanding counselling theory means understanding where it won't work.
Yeah.
So if you're studying, say, person-centered theory, and someone comes with a fear of heights, it may work. It may work for them. You may be able to talk about what was the trigger for that, and feel heard and understood, and be able to maybe engage with it. But for some clients, it may be they need a different approach, and that might be a more cognitive behavioural approach, where you're going through a step-by-step process of desensitizing somebody. So learning a theory and understanding a theory also gives you an idea of the limits of that theory, because all theories have limits. So I think that's important to know. One of the reasons we study is so that we don't just carry on regardless with clients, even though the theory we're applying doesn't work.
Yeah, very much so. I like that as an example. And of course, it ticks the box of the reason why when we are studying to become a counsellor, we will compare and contrast our main modality. So if you're on a person-centered course and you're learning person-centered therapy, you're going to look at other theories as well. You're going to look at them to be able to understand them, to understand what is similar, what is different, and having an understanding, yes, of your own theory, so you can check and kind of measure when there is an inadequacy, when that theory is not the best fit and in best service of that client. we also are kind of maybe in a position where we might maybe suggest a different kind of theory, but we'd need to have an understanding, a basic understanding of the different kinds of theories. So, of course, counselling is person-centered counselling. At its purest form is non-directive. The client leads the way. So if that client comes in and says, you know what, I'm going to Spain on a holiday in 2 weeks. I've never been on a plane before. I'm really frightened of flying. I have nightmares about flying, and I'm getting panic attacks just thinking of going flying. Person-centered therapy is not going to be a fit. It's not a short-term fix, and listening to the person's feelings and how much panic is coming up in them is not going to get them any closer to being able to get on that plane and have coping mechanisms while on the plane to be able to fly. And of course, then we might refer to a specialist program. I know many of the airlines put on programs for fear of flying, or it might be, as you said, cognitive behavioral therapy, where it is understood what the challenge is, and then maybe some exercises are put into place to kind of challenge that behavior and maybe put coping mechanisms in place, breathing exercises, whatever that may be. It's better service to that client. But without having an understanding of the theories, we're not able to shine that light, so not able to be there in that full service of the client. So I guess that when it comes to theory, the thing you started off by saying, we hear a lot about theory, and we certainly do. I mean, we taught together for some time, Rory, and we've been involved in Counselling Tutor, where there's been a big focus on students' journey for many years now. And we hear often that theory for some is tricky and difficult to learn, specifically if you're coming back maybe later in life into studies and you're hearing theories you've never heard before. And I think it's important to say that there are kind of some ways that you can facilitate the learning of theory so that it becomes your friend rather than your foe. And I think we start with understanding your own learning style. Understanding, do you learn better by hearing something? Do you learn better by reading something or seeing it done by another? And then looking for the resources that are going to match your learning style. I know that we've had countless letters from students that use our counselling study resource, which is kind of our library for students that kind of takes the complex theory, makes it easy to understand. And we have countless letters of individuals saying, I love that I can download the lecture, the theory lecture, I can put it on my phone, and I can listen to it again and again and again and again. And that's obviously an audible learner who learns best by listening to something and repeatedly listening to it. And when you find a way of matching your learning style, it can take a lot of the sting out of theory, and it can make it interesting and exciting. And I'm not saying everybody has the relationship that they view it as a scary thing, but if you do, are you looking at resources that match your learning style?
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned learning styles, because it's a fundamental underpin, isn't it, of learning anything, understanding how you learn, which brings me neatly to my final points on counselling theory. Counselling theories fall into two distinct categories: inside out and outside in. So if you're learning person-centered therapy, the client heals from the inside out. You apply the theory, and what happens is they self-actualize. The theory tells us that they self-actualize. But the biggest application of theory is applying it to oneself, because to be a person-centered therapist, you first need to absorb the theory into yourself, because the only tool that you're using is you. You're not using intervention, you're not using really deep theory, or you're not using techniques. You are the therapeutic conduit, if you like, the therapeutic tool. And I think that, if you're learning on a person-centered course, think how it applies to you. You could argue that, any theory it's a good start learning position to think how it applies to you and how you might have changed, because understanding that internal mechanism is mightily useful. I can tell you that by applying the theory to myself, and understanding my journey through my life journey through the theory, it was a lot easier for me then to measure the theory as I used it when I was working with clients, because it's an inside-out theory. Things like CBT and REBT and transactional analysis are outside in. The therapist is giving intervention, is giving observation, is using the theory, he's teaching in some cases. It's certainly a case of TA. In the case of CBT, they're teaching the theory to the client. So it's not a case of it's certainly in person-centered theory, seeing the client through the theory. It's a case of applying the theory through yourself, if that makes sense.
It is. And when you see theory related to self, it can be very powerful. And I reflect back to my own study journey, introjected values. This is part of person-centered theory. I remember the lecture on it. And then I remember going away and looking at myself and going, oh, my beliefs and all of the values I hold, are they mine, or they given to me by my primary caregivers, those around me that I look up to and value their opinions? Are they really mine? And it was a very rich seam that continues to this day. And that's what I love about personal development. And it's lovely when you can match your personal development back to a theory. It's really, really powerful. And I guess we were speaking about the learning of the theory. You've mentioned there, Rory, the outside in, the inside out, being able to measure that within self where you can and see it within your own life. It brings life, it breathes life into the words on the textbook page, and it makes it real. And when it goes from, okay, I've learned that, I can parrot it back to, I see, I get it now. And it makes it easier to identify when we see this happening within a client. And of course, another great way of learning theory is buddy up with peers. Buddy up with peers. And it doesn't have to be from your class if you're doing in-person training. It may be that you're at college and you don't have the time for deep, meaningful conversations outside of the study work. You can meet people within our Facebook, in the Counselling Tutor Facebook group. There are always people meeting up and having chats, and you can get together with peers, even if that is online, and you can discuss the theory that you're covering at that time. And you can ask questions about it. You can ask what other people's thoughts are on that. You can ask how they think it applies to themselves, how you can share how you think that might apply to you. And just having those discussions, you're studying your theory. You really are. You're examining it. You're exploring it. You're comparing. You're contrasting with others. There's a lot of rich learning there. If there's anything you don't know, so if a theory is explained, so you're sat in class and your lecturer is giving you a theory and you feel unsure, at the end of that lecture you go, you know what, I hear that, and yes, I can read these words, but I just don't get it. Go and ask your tutor. Just go up and say, you know what, I thank you very much for that. Can you tell me again? And then the tutor will always be in a position, they're there to impart that knowledge. They want to share that knowledge. They want you to get it. They want you to get it right in your assignment so they don't have to refer you. And I remember one for me was internal and external locus of evaluation. I heard the lecture on it. I heard the peer discussions on it when we kind of went into breakout rooms and we were writing what it was on flip charts. And I just felt lost. I didn't get it. And I remember going to my tutor at the time, who was Rory, and saying, I really don't get internal and external locus of evaluation. And thanks to you, Rory, you were very patient and you explained it again and again and again until I was able to grasp it, and you used different ways of explaining it until I gained traction in it. And now internal and external locus of evaluation come easy to me. I use that theory in my own personal development, where I look, am I acting from an internal or an external locus of evaluation? I can see it when I was in practice working with my clients, just in them presenting. Were they speaking from their own locus of evaluation, or is this information given over to someone else? So by clarifying, asking, that's another way to kind of learn that theory, breathe life into that theory, and make theory that can maybe seem dry and daunting and maybe scary exciting. It makes it exciting.
Yes. And also think of theory like a jigsaw puzzle. We've all done jigsaw puzzles, haven't we? And we've always got that jigsaw piece with, I'm not sure where that goes. And eventually, as you build a jigsaw puzzle, you can see clearly where it fits in. So my message to anybody who's struggling with theory is don't get over anxious about it. Easy for me to say, but don't get over anxious about it, because you're learning theory in chunks. You're learning it class by class. So what might be difficult to understand in the first class, when you do the second part of the theory, you might go, I get it now. Right, now I understand that piece. I can see where that piece fits in. So I often said to students, if you're reading theory and you don't understand it, don't stress too much about it, because as you go through and read other bits of theory, and then you'll talk to your peers, then you'll go, oh, that's how that works. Like the jigsaw puzzle, you're getting it pieces at a time, and it's only as you start to build up that picture that you can actually see where the pieces fit. And I'll say this, everybody, including me and Ken, I speak for Ken on this, we all went through that same process, because you cannot learn the theory all at once. It's not feasible to teach it in one big. You'd be there for weeks in a classroom. So it's taught lesson by lesson. So, if you don't understand, as Ken said, ask your tutor. But as you go through, it might be that what's not understandable in week 1, when you learn week 3's theory, you can then go, that links to week 1. That's just how the human brain works. So, don't get too stressed out about it. It would be my sage advice if I'm offering advice on the podcast.
Thank you for your sage advice, Rory.
Sage advice.
And I think just before we kind of back out of this, I want to recognize those that are in placement or indeed in practice. When we're in with our client, we are not referencing theory. It becomes unconscious competence within the theory room. When we're not in the theory room, in the counselling room. When we're in the counselling room, we are actively listening. We are using our skills. It's almost like the theory underpins that. It holds us. It surrounds us without us having to think about it. So when a client says something, you're not saying, I wonder if that comes from an external frame of reference. That doesn't happen within the therapy room. You are actively 100% there in their frame of reference. However, this is exciting. After that session is finished, you can then have a think of how that client presented, what they were presented. And there's a lot of learning in linking that to the theories post the session. And here's a spoiler alert. If you haven't written all your assignments, you're going to be asked in one of your assignments to take practice and link it to theory anyway. So it's great practice. Even if you're just doing a 10-minute mock session with a peer, there is some theory afterwards that you can go, okay, I can link that to such a theory. And if you start a habit of that, again, it brings life to the theory because you're seeing it in action. You're going, that is how it presented. I can link it back to this theory. It is real. It does exist. That's how I see it. And again, it makes it more exciting. And speaking of exciting, we've got a super duper handout for you. It's called The Importance of Counselling Theory. Within this handout, you're going to get a definition of theory. You're going to get the core purpose of theory nicely laid out for you. You're going to get detailed functions of theory. There's 6 of them. There's the spoiler, 6 detailed functions of theory. And then you're going to get how you can facilitate your own theory learning, what's going to make that easier for you. And then, of course, all of this is well referenced. And this is one of the super duper handouts that you can get free of charge. You just go to counsellingtutor.com, go to the podcast tab. It's right at the top of the page. Find episode 284 right there on that page. Just click, download it, and get your Importance of Theory in Counselling handout. And that brings us to the end of today's Student Services. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit counsellingskillsacademy.com to learn more and to claim your Counselling Tutor discount. That's counsellingskillsacademy.com. And as we see student services receding into the background, we now make our way into ethical, sustainable practice. This is the part where we focus on those that choose to go into private practice. We recognize that often when going into private practice, either building that or growing that private practice, so many of the skills that are required are not taught during our formal counselling training. Now, today, I think this is something that is probably taught during counselling training, but it's an important topic. It's important for us to cover it now, specifically if you're listening in real time, because this episode is going to be going out in December when many people are taking a break, and perhaps you're taking a break from your clients. And that's what we're speaking about, Rory, managing clients' breaks over a holiday period.
Yeah, yeah. So what I want to do is pick up on your observation about it's taught in class. It is, but it's taught only through the lens of working for an agency. So if you're working for an agency as a student, all the contacts the client will have should be through the agency. So when you finish for your holiday break, you go off on holiday. Client knows that there's a break coming up. You're taught to count the time down to a break, because obviously you won't be there, the agency will be shut, and off you go. Now, that's quite different to being in private practice, because it's not the agency the client will be contacting, it's you, because you'll have your own phone numbers as a private practitioner. So it makes it slightly different when you come to managing breaks, because maybe you're sitting having your Christmas dinner, or maybe you're observing Ramadan or Diwali or the many different holidays that we have, and the phone goes and it's the client. What do you do? How do you manage that? And I think that's something that really isn't taught in as a student. This is something that you have to learn as a private practitioner. I would say the very first thing is think about how many phones you have. Do you have a private phone and a business phone? Because your business phone is more easily switched off. So if you turn your business phone off, that's your business closed as agreed. If you've got a private phone that you're using for your friends and your family, and the client phone's up, they're going to come through on your private phone. It's like phoning your house. And if they've got your number, what are you going to do if the phone rings while you're sitting there having your turkey lunch? Are you going to ignore it? Are you going to answer it? In which case, how are you going to manage that? So there's a lot of things you have to manage with client breaks over holidays when you're a private practitioner that you may not be aware of when you are a student, when you're working in an agency. So I think the first thing is managing your communication, Ken. Thinking about, should I get actually a business phone, one that I just use for client contact, that it turns off on and off during business hours? So my personal phone, the phone that I'm using in the evenings, the phone that I'm using to talk to my friends and loved ones, is my form of communication. It's not going to get interrupted by clients.
100%. Yeah. Looking at your communication methods would start with your contract. You would be speaking to your clients about that. Outside of holiday breaks, you'd be speaking about what the protocols are around contacting you, the how, what, and why of that. But when we kind of now focus on holiday breaks, I think what we start with is recognizing that it's a frame of reference, a holiday break. For some, A holiday break is a joyous, wonderful, oh goody, I've got some time off work and it's this time of year and this is a happy time of year. And that is their frame of reference. But there are those that have a very different view of that. It can be a very lonely time. It can be a time of remembering people that are no longer around. It can be a time of looking back and having to face traumatic memories around something that happened over this time of year, for example. It can just be, for some, a lonely time where others have gone away and they find themselves outside of their regular support structures of family, friends, work colleagues. You know, for some, work is a part of their support structure. Going and seeing colleagues on a daily basis, and now having a week, 10 days, maybe longer away from work can be troubling. And it's about having these discussions well in advance and understanding who your client is, what their frame of reference is towards the upcoming holiday. Briefing it at range. And what I mean by that is, let's say, for instance, you're coming up to a break. You don't want to be saying to the client, well, we won't be seeing each other for the next few weeks because, of course, the XYZ break is coming up at the moment. So we'll pick up again on this date. You would want to go back many, many weeks, if not a month or so, saying, you know, I'm just mindful next month is, or in 2 months we're coming up to, and we will be taking a break, so that you have time for the client to process that and to bring anything that may be around for them around that holiday, that particular holiday or break, so that you can work on mapping support, so that you don't have a client that has a need to try and call you on whatever line you have, or you don't have a client knocking on your door because they find themselves in a very distressful place and with no support mapped going into that, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't work I think you do on your own. So I think, you know, prior to, you know, a good few weeks before you are going on a break, think about your high-risk clients, take them to supervision, talk to your supervisor about mapping support. You know, get another opinion. And mapping support can look like giving phone numbers to support services that work over holiday periods, such as the Samaritans here in the UK. I know in different countries there are phone lines where people can phone up if they're desperate. Have that phone number as part of the greeting on your mobile phone answering service. So if someone phones up, say you're not available at the moment, but if they need help, and you know, make sure that number's there. The same thing on your email responder. An email responder is when someone sends you an email and it automatically responds. You don't respond; it will automatically respond saying, "I'm on holiday at the moment." Have that embedded into your email. If you need support, a list of numbers.
Yeah.
And also, as Ken said, do it at range. If you've got a client that is really, really struggling, and you're thinking that you know, not to put too fine a point on it, life or death, you may want to think about making a referral. If someone is seriously contemplating taking their own life or is at high risk, and you're not going to be around, I think the right thing to do is say, look, you know, have that candid conversation and say, look, I hear what you're saying. I am not going to be around. You know, don't go down the path of saying, well, yeah, well, we'll schedule an online session for Boxing Day or for in the middle of the holiday. I'm not going to be around, but I'm concerned about you, and I hear what you're saying. Let's try and put something in place, you know. And you can do little practical things if you're working in the room. You know, you can do things like give them a transitional object. Now, a transitional object is the sort of thing we give to children when they're upset. We give them a teddy bear and they represent us. They hug the bear instead of us. So we can give them a transitional object. We could give them, you know, I don't know. I wear bracelets, like beaded bracelets, and I've given a client a beaded bracelet, and I said, hang on to that, and you know, and then when we meet again, you can give it me back. And they have something of a transition. They have something when I wasn't around, that they knew that, professionally I cared for them, and that we'd be meeting again. But all this needs to be put into place. You cannot do it at the last minute. You really can't do it at the last minute. And I think for me, when I'm supervising, I will be saying to my supervisors, anybody you worried about? Anyone you worried about over Christmas or over the break? And we start with that, I think, as a topic of discussion, and then we look at managing support. And I was very, very strict with that when I was supervising students. Because you have to teach people to see the alert signs. They're students in training, so I say, let's have a look at. Have you got any high risk clients? I'm looking at my notes, and you're saying that this person is high risk. So it all needs to be done well in advance.
Yeah, very much so. I like the way you said you don't do this on your own. This is a great supervision session. And if you don't have a supervisor like Rory, because Rory, you instigate that kind of a discussion. Maybe your supervisor doesn't instigate those discussions, but you have the right to instigate that discussion and say, today I'd like my supervision, I'd really like to speak about how I can prepare my clients for upcoming breaks. And you're right, Rory, you might look over and say, do I have any high risk clients? And the interesting thing about holidays is they can bring about risks that are unseen outside of the holidays. And that's why it's worth having the chat with each and every client as you're approaching the holiday, saying, I'm mindful in 4 weeks' time, we've got this XYZ holiday coming up. And I wonder how you are around that holiday. And with us not being able to see each other for 3 sessions, I wonder how you might fill that time that we spend together and what your support structure may look like. And that's a great way to put the welcome mat down, to invite the client in, and the client may well go, oh, well, we're going away with a family and blah, blah, blah. And there you're great. Wonderful. But you may get that one client who says, yes, actually, it's a tricky time for me. I lost my dad over this time of year, and I think I'm going to be on my own because the rest of the family are all going away to such and such a place. Then you can start. There's something to work on there that may have remained hidden, and you want to be uncovering that with enough time and enough sessions to work on it, rather than saying, oh, well, that's next week. Sorry about that. Have that thought. And then I like what you said, Rory. I think it's a good, what action can you take? Autoresponder on your email. Well, first of all, you've already spoken to the client, so it's almost a verbal contract that you're going to be away for the time you're going to be away. You would verbally contract, I'm not going to be contactable. You won't be able to get me on the phone. You won't be able to send me an email. I'm not going to be available. And that's about self-care. We need to look after ourselves during those holidays. We cannot be we're not a blue light service. We're not there no matter what. We need to look after ourselves and our family over that time, but we need to have that conversation with our clients. And if the client then does reach out, they're going to get an email back on your autoresponder that says exactly what you verbally said to them, reminding them, but also giving them maybe the links to who they can contact. Like you said, Rory, maybe the Samaritans or whoever that may be in your country. If they did phone, maybe there is that answering phone which reminds them exactly of what you verbally contracted with them. Because, of course, holiday seasons can also be a time of imbibing, turning to maybe more of a use of alcohol. I certainly look at the television adverts and they suggest buy 6 bottles and get the 7th one free was the latest advert that I saw. And recently on a trip to the shops, the shelves are actually absolutely groaning with alcohol. Alcohol can bring out different parts in people. It can cause maybe a lack of judgment, and the odd phone call might go out or the odd text might go out. So if you've had that conversation and protected your privacy, I think that is a good place to be. Interesting topic, Roy, and I'm glad that you brought it. It's very timely as we're speaking right now.
Absolutely. And one final thing is there, and I'm sure I don't have to tell experienced practitioners this, but I think it's always worth reminding ourselves, there's a very fine line between rescuing and facilitating.
Yeah.
And I often wait for the client to instigate a conversation about, struggling between sessions, as opposed to saying, I think you might struggle. So what you need to do is here's a teddy bear and here's my bracelet, and here's a picture of me, and I made a nice little recording,
a shrine,
and sending them out. Because obviously that becomes you're really into the realms then of asserting power, and also not giving them not giving them the power of their own agency, and I think that autonomy is the word that's used in ethical frameworks. So I think that you are responsible to the client, not for them, unless you're working in certain situations. So just be thoughtful of that. I've had many conversations with my supervisor, and she said, "You sure this isn't rescuing Rory?" And I go, "Oh yeah, probably is. Yeah, I won't do that then." And when we care for people, it's easy to kind of cross that line, I think. So just a bit of a thought, I guess, as we roll out of this topic.
Yeah. When dealing with things like transitional objects, I recommend go to counsellingtutor.com, our mother website, and just do a search on our main page for transitional objects, and you see our past podcasts on that. We've spoken about it a few times, and I think we've got some articles on it as well. It's to be used where appropriate. Like you say, Rory, you wouldn't be saying, right, we've got a holiday coming up, here's the bracelet, here's the
No.
And of course, as always, Rory and I are not the experts. We don't claim to be the experts. We're two peers having a discussion. It's a topical discussion because we're coming up to a big holiday period here in the UK as we're making this in real time, and we do this in service, but in service of you and of course your clients. But the main reason for us having these conversations is so that you maybe think about it. Maybe you go to your own supervisor and discuss it. Maybe you won't use any of the things we've suggested. Maybe you'll have much better ideas than we've had. But let's get these conversations going in service of the clients that we see. And that was our ethical, sustainable practice. Moving from ethical, sustainable practice into practice matters. This is the CPD section of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Don't forget to claim those CPD hours or minutes that you listen to this podcast and the time that you spend thinking about it on your CPD tracker. And Rory, you met up with Cath Knibbs, who's been a close friend of Counselling Tutor for some years now, on a exceptionally important topic, and that is the dangers of technology in the counselling room.
Absolutely. And for those of you who are regular listeners, episode 280, we talked about third person in the room, phones and technology. If you want to hear that as a kind of extra, go to the Counselling Tutor website, go to the podcast tab, find episode 280, and it's the middle section where we talked about it. But we got a real expert in. Cath Knibbs is a behaviourist technologist, psychotherapist, and she spent a lot of time studying how technology and counselling can sometimes be complementary and it can sometimes collide. I took this interesting topic of phones and technology in the therapy room, asked her a question, and this is what she had to say about it.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
We live in a world of technology. It surrounds us, being what we carry in our pockets, what we use to watch our TVs, even the satellite navigation that we've become so used to in our cars. And in episode 280, for those of you who are regular listeners, if you've not listened to episode 280, Counselling Tutor website, go to podcast tab, go to the tab, find 280, and I talked about third person in the room, phones and text, and why phones and technology can be an intrusion into working with clients. So I'm delighted today to be interviewing someone who I've called for a long time, a thought leader who ploughs new ground, my good friend Cath Knibbs, and we're going to be talking about technology in the room and what we need to be thoughtful of. So Cath, it really is a great pleasure to speak with you again.
And ditto, Rory. Thank you.
So in episode 280, I talked about an incident that was on our Facebook group where a client went to a therapist and was talking about their issues, and Alexa popped up and gave a response. And Alexa is a voice-activated device which connects to your tech, and you can say, Alexa, turn on the lights. There's going to be people at home hating me now as their lights go on. And it just chimed up with something. And the person was very put off, mentioned it, and the therapist kind of smoothed over it. But it does bring a very serious aspect to our practices, and that is having technology in the room. And I know you have great expertise on this, so what's your thoughts on it?
No, is the answer. Technology in the room? No. Even, which upsets a lot of people, Rory, because what I'm going to do is just give you a very, very brief story of something that happened in 2014. So I am an avid tech user, which I'm sure that people who know of me will know that I am. But I use tech for measuring all sorts of things on my own body, should I say. And I use and have used heart rate variability software in the room on clients for a long time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll define what I actually mean by devices and what I mean by software. So I bought a Fitbit when they first came out, and what a fantastic little piece of kit it was that would measure, your 10,000 steps per day and how well you were doing. And I could sync this to my phone. And good old Apple in the early days would allow you to sync up all sorts of things, your emails with your phone with your computer with your television. And my Fitbit would vibrate and show me the phone number of who was calling my phone, which at the time, I was sitting with a client and my phone rang, which was fine because my client didn't know my phone was ringing. It was in my bag at the time. Only my Fitbit displayed the phone number of the person that was ringing me. And my client said, don't you want to get that? Because they also had a Fitbit. So they knew why my phone had lit up. And of course, they could see the name on the Fitbit, and it had the same surname as mine. So the client said, along the lines of, don't you want to get that? And I said, no, it's not important. It's clearly somebody ringing me. I will obviously go and talk to them after our session. And this happened 3 times. And it turns out that it was an emergency phone call that I needed to take. And there is a rule within my family that if you need me, you ring me 3 times, and it will always chime on the 3rd one because you can create technology to do that. Afterwards, I sat thinking, that was interesting. How do I now keep my children's names or my family's names out of the therapy room? Well, I had a choice. I either didn't wear the technology or I changed the fact that it could be connected. Now, I've been writing about this for a long time, Rory, and some of those devices, like the Fitbit, were innocuous. They literally displayed a phone number. There was no connectivity. You couldn't have data scraped from it, which is one of the things that really we're going to talk about. But devices are things that can listen in and collect or scrape or mine data. Those are the terms that often gets used by cyber security professionals who are trying to prevent cyber criminality. What we're talking about are iPhones, smartphones, tablets, consoles, TVs, computers, Alexas, Google Home, whatever these devices are. They should not, for security reasons, be in the same room where you are conducting a confidential service.
Well, you said it. There we go. And if we think about the technology that we use on a day-to-day basis, it's mind-boggling. It really, really is. I was saying only to my wife the other day, my father, who died in 1979, who was a very technologically advanced thinker, would be absolutely blown away by the tech in my studio here. And the idea you can see yourself on a map would be just completely mind-blowing. Satellites and maps and things. But what you've talked about one specific danger, that of being distracted. You were distracted because there was an emergency call and you knew it was an emergency. The client was alerted to that. That's one aspect of it. But what are the other aspects of having devices in the room?
Well, I mean, that distraction can be both client and therapist. And I work with children, and often they want to bring their devices into the room because, they might get that important phone call, which to them is important, but might not be in an emergency type situation.
Sure.
The biggest risk is devices have the ability to listen in. And this technology is not new. I think people can go and listen to the episode that you and I recorded for my podcast, where we talk about that data surveillance, that data brokerage, that data mining that happens. Tech companies created devices that can help you in emergency situations, but also they designed them so that you can be tracked and monitored for their gains, which usually involves advertising or selling your data to other services so they can make money out of it. So there is this thing about when we use technology, it's being aware that your technology is always listening. So just taking that Alexa device for a moment, the fact that you can talk to it and it will do what you request when you talk to it, as long as it recognizes your voice and what you've actually said, tells you that it's always listening. And when you hear the word smart alongside a device, so smart TV, smart fridge, you're actually talking about something that's referred to as the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is an always on technology. Now, if we're offering a confidential service, let's say we want to do it using teletherapy with using a system like we're using at the moment. We're using a video conferencing piece of software. That software has to be able to listen in. Otherwise, it couldn't transmit the vocalizations and the visuals like we're having. But also, if you have a web browser open, there are certain specific pieces of software embedded into certain sites, such as Meta, that can also listen. So when we are using our technology, it's not necessarily about the physical thing in the room. It's also about understanding what these services are providing, and the way for us to understand that, and I know this is going to be the biggest downside of people listening to this, is you have to read the terms and conditions. And in those terms and conditions, the companies must tell you what they do and they don't do.
Yes, I think that's very interesting. And of course, if we move on to the online space, so online and telephone counselling has become quite a thing in the last few years. Certainly after COVID, it's become mainstream now. It's become a mainstream offering since 2019. It's come of age. And I'm doing a lecture in the January of 2024 on the use of technology and video platforms. And what I've discovered is it would make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You know, if you I've spent a lot of time reading the terms and conditions of a certain platform, and let me tell you, the amount of data that they gather is eye-watering. Yep. So things like what camera you're using, what microphone you're using, what geographical area you're in, and on and on and on and on and on. And these things are stored up even, and this is the scary bit for me. I'm looking at your video feed, and you've got Cath Knibbs, a little tab called Cath Knibbs, which is you, and I've got a little tab called Rory Lee Oaks, which is me, and they even capture that.
And the internet service provider location that provides that name with that. So I'll give a clue here. I'm in my office, so the internet service provider will pass over the information that says Cath Knibbs at this internet address, using it on this day at this time with, and it will also give your details.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a bit of a grey area in how that data is used. And there are companies called data mining companies. My research, my eyes were open to a whole new business arena where there are companies who are data brokers. They sell data, and they sell data to companies who want to market you, who want to, once they've seen your name and they matched your name, your geographical location, they try and match products. This is, if you go on to, news sites and you notice there's advertising coming up, and you're thinking, I was looking at shoes the other day, and how odd, shoes are coming up. All this data is sellable. You are a commodity. You are being bought and sold on international markets, and these companies are worth billions of pounds. My research said that one's worth something like $5 billion, and they buy and sell data. And in my lecture, there's one particular company, and they sell information to a very well-known video platform, to their sales team.
And there's something to consider here about as a person, so not even a professional, as a person, it's about protecting yourself as well as the people that you're working with. But if that data is collected about you, Rory, and you were my client in this particular situation, you may well be marketed to by, so let's say, for example, we're using Zoom or Teams. Microsoft or Zoom can then sell that information on, and that information quite often gets sent to services and organisations, pretty much cyber criminals, who will set a program running on a Friday night, go home in their suit, because quite often they are day-to-day business people. They will go home, and by Monday morning, it has collected all of the evidence and data that they need to then sell on to other companies. And the point I want to make here that's really, really important is if I go into a shop and I hand over £1 for a chocolate bar, because they are very expensive now, that £1 has been spent in one transaction.
Yeah.
Data can be sold multiple times to multiple companies. And sometimes we need to think about, and what are we logged into if we have our devices open when we're in the location or the vicinity where our clients might be as well. So it is a recommendation, certainly, to have within your contract that you do not have devices in the room, that you educate both yourself and your clients into, if you're going to use a platform, certainly in my company Privacy 4, we recommend WriteUp, ISOS Connect and TherapyLog, because all three services are based within the UK. That is a data protection thing. But also they are services deliberately made for conducting therapy online. And there are still issues in this country with some of the things that we've got, because there are so many disciplines to take note of. So it's complicated, but it is it's achievable to protect you and the people that you're working with.
Yes, and full disclosure here, my company are the owners of TherapyLog, which is an online platform that therapists can use to store notes, send appointments, and also video, secure video platform. And I have to tell you that I have spent hours, absolutely hours, in meetings with techs, understanding the technological requirements. We spoke with the video company, the people who supply the video feed, and we met with their technical people and talked about the video just disappears once the video finishes. That's it. It's not recorded. It's not stored anywhere. It just disappears. There's no location information to that, and it was only when we got talking about it, we're thinking we could probably be billionaires because there's every level there's an opportunity to scrape data, which we're not, but there's an opportunity to scrape data, and that data is then offered up. And how may that happen? Client comes in, you have your phone in the therapy room switched on, they're speaking about something, and they go off. How might that, if we put our tinfoil hats on, how might that conversation be taken in and then used to market the client. What could happen in that situation, Cath?
Well, the one example I generally give is if you are a specialist therapist as well. So maybe you work with something. Let's say HIV. If you are not protecting what happened, that conversation, I mean, this starts from the very outset of being contacted, whether that's on a advertising platform, whether it's via email, text message, et cetera. So it's understanding the data journey. And that data journey can be intercepted by a man in the middle, a bad actor, as they're often referred to. Yes. At any point, if you do not know how to protect that data, which is why, I'm certainly in the space and realm at the minute writing about why our profession needs training in this, because we need to understand the data journey. What could be marketed is HIV products, medication tubs. It might be there's a new trial for a medication, et cetera. Or what can happen, which is detrimental to the client, is they may be refused health insurance if that data is sold to companies that then do a background check to see if somebody has a HIV diagnosis or has made inquiries. It can just be as simple as making an inquiry.
Yeah. That's the scary world we live in, Cath. And I think a lot of people don't realise it. We see the devices we have as very useful, benign entities, that make life. I was having a meal with my wife, and we thought, put the heating on in the house. And I picked my phone up, clicked on, and lo and behold, the heating went on in my house. And he's like, this is great. It'll be warm when we get in. So helpful. But, the payoff with that is that every time I click that, there's data being collected. Someone somewhere is getting that information. They may aggregate it, so it may not be personal. It may be a bulk of information that's used. How many thousands of people switch the heating on? Did they do it remotely, or did they do it when they're in the house? Or it can be personalised. So I guess, Cath, if you were to give 3 top tips of devices and therapy room, what would your 3 observations be to anybody listening now who's probably frightened to death?
Top tips as in do or do not.
Do not. Do not.
Do not have. So this includes Apple iWatches, Garmin's, TomToms, things that can be worn on the wrist. Mm-hmm. So I would say I wear a Whoop band. It does not have the capability to listen, but it tracks my GPS. So there's understanding about what each piece of technology does. So the do not is where possible. So I will give a caveat here. I actually work with a client who needs her technology because of a medical condition that she has. And that means that what we had to do was contract that we cannot talk about deep therapeutic processes whilst that is on her wrist. Which puts me into a position of, so what am I doing as a psychotherapist if I can't do deep psychotherapy work with a client because the device is listening? But I also can't make that client take that device off because then she's at medical. She's there's potential distress that's with that. So do not have devices within the vicinity where you are operating a confidential service. So that is psychotherapy, counselling, supervision, or whatever name you have for it. If you are phoning your family, and I want to make this caveat very clear because people panic, if you are phoning your family on WhatsApp, that is fine if you understand what it is that you are giving up by doing that to the services that you're using. But certainly if you offer a confidential service, you must offer confidentiality. And the only way you can do that is by not having devices in the room. If you are practicing from home and you might have a smart TV, you must turn it off at the wall. If you have an Alexa, a Google Home, whatever the other ones are, the Fire Sticks, anything like that, they must be removed because even when turned off, they can allegedly listen. And that is from many of the security services that have informed us of that. And certainly, Explain to your clients about social media, because even if their phone is so I have 2 rooms. I have a room where the devices get left and I go in the other room. The very fact my phone is in close proximity to my clients may mean that they see me on social media as a recommendation for something, or they might pop up on Facebook as a people you may know. So have that within your contract, and certainly go and get some training in data protection, cybersecurity, privacy rights and freedoms, and the use of technology.
Well, on that sobering summary, Cath, thank you very much.
Massive thank you to Cath Knibbs. Thank you to you, Rory, for reaching out and holding those interesting conversations. This has been episode 284 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, we started off with student services and why do we learn counselling theory, a bit of a deep dive there. In ethical sustainable practice, we talked about managing client breaks over the holiday period, and that may be a step change from being a placement counsellor to becoming a private practitioner. Extra things that are essential that you know. And then finally, we met up with a great friend of mine and a great friend of Counselling Tutor, Cath Knibbs, who talks about the dangers of technology in the counselling room. Before we close out today's episode, I've got a couple of quick favours to ask you, the listener. First, if you've enjoyed and benefited from our conversation today, please leave us a 5-star review on whichever platform you're tuning in from. It genuinely helps us reach more ears and grow our community. And secondly, if someone in your circle might benefit from our discussions, share this episode on your social media platforms. Word of mouth is so powerful, and we appreciate every share, tweet, or X as it is now, or post that brings new listeners into our community. And thank you for allowing us to be part of your journey. And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.